Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm John Macri, joined, as always, by PFF's lead fantasy analyst, Nathan Jahnke. Nate, we're back with more NFL Draft Capital. We talked winners and losers coming out of the NFL Draft earlier this week, and now we got to get to dive into some actual rankings to see how we are, I guess, stacking these rookies up against one another. So how are you doing? How are you feeling here, come a week removed now from the NFL Draft?
Yeah, doing fine. It's Dynasty Rookie season, having Dynasty Rookie drafts already. Still have plenty to go as well, but it's been fun getting back into fantasy football. Strategy for these rookies has been a lot of fun as well, since there's interesting guys at every position, so your current roster always impacts things, but like you said, we're going to go over our rankings. We've got some slight differences throughout as well, so I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's always a fun time of year, especially like doing rookie drafts immediately following the NFL draft. I've already seen some wild picks, in the first round and second round. Even I think I saw it was in one where Shedeur Sanders went 102 in a super flex draft, which was some people I think just can't get rid of like the pre-draft bias, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild sometimes, but we're going to cover our kind of, I guess, top 12 rookies in this episode. A lot of the same players, like you said, within the top 12 for Nate and I, obviously, just in slightly different orders. So we'll talk about why we're higher or lower on certain picks, and there are at least a couple different players for us. So we could talk about what's kind of pushed them into the first round for us or pushed them out of the first round as well. So lots to get into. But first, I do want to let you guys know that if you love fantasy football, which of course you do, if you love winning your leagues, then you need to listen up, because right now we have a 25% off an annual subscription for a PFF Plus membership. You'll get full access to the 2025 NFL Draft Guide with detailed reports on hundreds of prospects, complete with scheme fits and player comps to help you prep for your drafts. And beyond the Draft Guide, PFF Plus includes advanced tools and insights trusted by all 32 teams, perfect for building and managing winning fantasy rosters. So head to subscribe.pff.com and use the code DRAFT25 to get 25% off. Again, that's subscribe.pff.com, code DRAFT25, and you'll get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. So with that said, Nate, let's get into the rankings here. And we'll start, obviously, at 101, where everybody is going to be starting. Ashton Jeanty going to the Las Vegas Raiders. We both have him at 101 here, 6th overall pick. Goes to a great situation for opportunity and touches, and obviously comes out of college with this ridiculous rushing profile and a strong receiving profile as well. I don't think there was ever going to be any doubt that Ashton Jeanty was 101 for us in rookie drafts, regardless of where he landed in the NFL draft. So, I mean, what else is there to say about Jeanty at this point? Did any part of you feel like you might waver here, either for Superflex or anything like that?
I mean, there was that slight disappointment that he didn't land with the Chicago Bears and
Sure.
that offensive line and that offense, but the Raiders were a fairly solid landing spot. First off, going to a team that had a clear need at running back, you could argue they had the biggest need out of anyone at running back. Raheem Mostert and Sincere McCormick are the next two running backs on the depth chart. So Jeanty should see as much playing time as he can possibly handle, or the coaches think he can handle. There's no one that's going to take away any playing time from him. So that's obviously a big positive thing. There are plenty of landing spots where, had he gone to Jacksonville, for example, we still probably would have expected Travis Etienne to take some snaps in passing situations, for example. And that's not the case with the Raiders. And then the offensive line, I think, is generally a positive. Obviously not the same as Chicago's offensive line. And also, when you're comparing him to the top running backs overall, not just in Dynasty, you've got Atlanta and Detroit and Philadelphia with 3 excellent offensive lines, and the Raiders don't quite have that. But I don't see any clear weakness on the line. It's mostly young players who are expecting to improve, including 2 players who were rookies last season and played fairly well as rookies. So generally thinking positively of this line, and hopefully it can take a step to another level with Jeanty at running back. So excited about this opportunity for him with the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about the opportunity. Just again, the pure volume of touches, I think, in that offense that he should see there is probably better than almost anybody in the league at this point, just considering some of the other options and considering the player that Jeanty is. And thinking about even just the Raiders and what their potential is to kind of support like a top fantasy running back. Like Josh Jacobs was just there in 2022, posted an RB3 overall season in PPR because he got this a ton of touches, right? And they were kind of middle of the pack as far as like run blocking goes as well, right? And I expect them to kind of be in that same kind of range as well. We'll see what happens as far as what their offense, how they're able to operate there. They brought in Geno Smith, so I think it can be a pretty comparable offense to what Josh Jacobs was doing there, and a similar volume as well. And I just think Ashton Jeanty a better prospect at this point too. So a lot of potential here for Ashton Jeanty. I think top 3 overall running backs in 2025 is within the range of outcomes here. The number 1 running back in Dynasty is within his range of outcomes come this time next year as well, right? So a lot of reason to be excited about him, and I don't think there's really much of an argument for anybody else at 101 at this point in the draft. But we do get to 102, Nate, and we do have a little bit of difference here. So you have Omarion Hampton of the Los Angeles Chargers as your 102 in rookie drafts. I have Travis Hunter, so maybe we'll start with Omarion Hampton as the second running back drafted, first round draft capital, going to a nice situation himself in that he should get a lot of touches here. But yeah, what's got Hampton here for you, or however you want to approach it? What's got Hunter out?
Yeah, we'll start with Hampton because it's easy to just talk about Travis Hunter the entire time. And I think we're largely in agreement that we like Hampton. We like him landing with the Chargers. I think with Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, I know they didn't run a ton last season, but I think that had more to do with the running backs on the roster compared to Roman, who has this large history of featuring running backs in the offense. They added Najee Harris. Now they added Hampton. They added Becton on the offensive line, who should help their run blocking. Tyler Conklin, who's an every down tight end, who can allow them to be a little more versatile in their tight end usage as well. So I think they want to run the ball more often, and I think with Hampton they will. I'm not all that concerned with Najee Harris being part of the offense. Yeah, he'll see some carries here and there, but I think Hampton's going to be the clear every down back for Los Angeles. Like, they just signed Harris to that 1 year, $5 million deal, so not the hugest contract in the world. We've seen plenty of running backs at that contract become backups quite quickly. So I think Hampton should be a fantasy starting running back in his first season, has the talent and the upside to be among the top running backs. I think the offensive line will kind of play a big factor here. They've invested a lot in that offensive line in recent drafts. Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, Joe, all early first round picks. And so far they've mostly sort of worked out, but not quite to the level that you would hope a bunch of early first round picks would be. So I think there's the opportunity there for them to become an great offensive line. And then Hampton would be a top 10 fantasy running back, for example. So I think with Hampton, the safer of the options that we're talking about right now, and I think position need also plays a decent factor. If you have the second pick and you need a running back, Hampton is a perfectly fine option. But if you're set at running back, I also think it's acceptable to look at other positions.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I don't have Hampton far down the rankings or anything like that. He's 103 for me, right? Like I love the landing spot, the opportunity, love the player as well. So I'm with you. I think there's definitely a lot of potential here. Basically, the only difference was that I'm obsessed with the potential of Travis Hunter more than anything else, right? Like I definitely get that not everybody is going to want to spend this second overall pick in rookie drafts on Hunter. There's absolutely risk there in that maybe he isn't getting enough snaps at wide receiver, or maybe he becomes more of a cornerback than we initially expect. But I think for me, it just comes down to the type of talent that Hunter is, where he's like this truly generational prospect that we've never seen before. But also the Jaguars are at least 100% confident in his ability to be that unique weapon on offense and defense as well, considering what they invested in him, right? Like for me, I think he is the best player in the entire 2025 draft. I think he's going to get fed the ball in Liam Cohen's offense in any chance that they get, with the ability to put up, kind of wide receiver one numbers sooner rather than later in his NFL career, especially in leagues where you're getting defensive points for offensive players, I don't think it's particularly close in those formats. Hunter is easily the 102 there because nobody else is kind of giving you that type of upside or production. But even just as a wide receiver, I still think that Hunter has more upside than any wide receiver in this class, more longevity potential than a running back like Hampton as well, where the most ideal for outcome for Hampton is probably 5 years of production, most ideal. Hunter could be a Hall of Fame type player and be giving us 10 to 12 years of production at the very least, right? And I just can't pass on that potential, even if I love Hampton, and what he could be for the Chargers this year and for the next few seasons. I don't think anyone has as much long-term potential in the NFL as Hunter in this class, if he's as good as most people seem to believe he is, right? Which we could look back on this class in 5 years, and maybe a few of these first rounders have already kind of fizzled out by then. But I think the one that will always be there is Hunter, and I think he'll be doing it as a wide receiver as well. So that's why he's 102 for me. Just again, it's potential, it's the longevity, it's the talent, all those kind of things rolled up into one that I just don't want to miss out on at this point. And understanding that, people might be more risk adverse there and not want to take that swing. But yeah, for me, I like Hunter too much. So maybe a little biased.
Fair. First off, I'll make the distinction that I put my rankings for offensive only leagues, not with IDP in mind.
Yep.
So if it is an IDP league where you can put Hunter at either spot, you get points for both things he does. I think 102 is perfectly fair. I think an argument can be made that he could be the 101 just depending on what the IDP scoring system is, how much points you get for IDP compared to offensive stuff, assuming you can play him on both sides, which I know on ESPN and Sleeper have positions for him on both offense and defense. So Hunter definitely there if you can play him at both. My concern with Hunter is I agree that the upside is there with if everything goes right, he's the best wide receiver in this class, probably worthy of the 102 in that situation. For me, there's just more situations that could go wrong for him compared to a bunch of other rookies. So it's a risk reward kind of thing. Because Hunter, I could see a scenario where he is playing 75% of snaps on offense and 75% of snaps on defense. In that situation, that's incredible. That's something that we haven't seen an NFL player do in several decades. But for fantasy football specific purposes, if he's only playing or getting points for what he does on offense, playing 75% of snaps puts him at a disadvantage compared to most other fantasy starting receivers. So I could see that scenario playing out, or any other kind of combination of him playing more at defense, more on offense. All of those are possibilities. All of those are areas, things that could be good or bad for Hunter. At least looking in the short term, I think the Jaguars have that position versatility at wide receiver that they can rotate Hunter out relatively easily and still have wide receivers put in positions to succeed, because they do have a number of wide receivers who can play different spots on the offense. Starting with Brian Thomas, who can play both outside and in the slot and different roles in the offense. So I think that kind of helps out the Jaguars and helps them be flexible. And we don't know what will happen. We probably won't know what will happen until week 1 hits, because we'll try to read into every single quote that's said throughout training camp if he's playing at all in the preseason, which I might be a little surprised if he's playing in the preseason. We'll try to read into that, but we won't know until week 1 and how much he's playing on each. And that could change. They might find that he's doing well and he can deal with more. They might find out that he's wearing out too much and he has to play less. We just don't know what will happen. So I agree, Hunter has the potential to be the top overall wide receiver in the NFL, for example, but there's also that downside of maybe he ends up playing more on defense. And then I will add, I think you made an interesting point about the longevity of running backs versus wide receivers. I do feel like the longevity of wide receivers has shortened in recent seasons. I think that's something that would be interesting to study. My theory is just there's so many good wide receivers coming out of college. We have a number of wide receivers we're talking about today. Every year it feels like it's been a pretty decent wide receiver class, that because there's so much youth and speed in those wide receivers, because more colleges have gone to more 3 wide receiver sets, that's leading to more wide receivers who can make it. Even the transfer portal, there's a lot of the wide receivers who were picked day 2, day 3, started at these really small schools relatively, transferred to a bigger school, might not have been on NFL radars had they not had the opportunity to transfer. So I think the quality of wide receivers is getting better in the NFL. I think we're seeing more and more wide receivers kind of get phased out of the league. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins, for example, be a rotational guy these past 2 years or so, and he is still in his young 30s. So I think even though we've seen historically wide receivers be able to last in the league much longer, and we have seen running backs get phased out of the league a little bit earlier, we are still seeing a number of running backs who make it to age 30, age 31. It's just less likely that they make it to that age. So I think that's something interesting that even though there's the historic wisdom of what we've seen in the past, I think that has evolved a little bit and worth further research.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? Like I think you're right. Like the every single year it feels like we have like at least, 4 or 5 potential first round wide receivers and then a whole bunch more on day 2 as well. I think it's just more for me like the ones that do hit, the ones that do turn out to be special are the ones that kind of tend to last much longer compared to, the running backs that hit as well. Like the high-end running backs will still kind of phase out quicker than the high-end wide receivers, but yeah, it would be interesting to kind of pull those numbers, like, updated numbers to kind of see how those look at this point now. But yeah, I'm with you. I definitely understand that there is risk in drafting Travis Hunter this early, but yeah, still a player that I think I want to kind of hitch my wagon to when it comes to rookie drafts here. So in the 104 spot, Nate, we do have another wide receiver here. We went with Tetairoa McMillan. Both of us have him. Well, actually, yeah, I guess you would have him as 103, right? And then I'd have him right in that same spot just behind Omarion Hampton as well. But again, clear-cut wide receiver 1 for Bryce Young in the Carolina Panthers offense. He should hold down that role for a long time as well, considering, the team's invested a top 10 pick in him. But, for McMillan, for me, like when it came to a lot of like just his receiving metrics that matter coming out of college, like there weren't really any like defining weaknesses to suggest that he wouldn't be capable of being a top target in an NFL offense, even if he wasn't like up to par with a lot of the other top 10 wide receiver draft picks of years past. Like I think he can still be a very good and capable wide receiver 1 in the NFL. Should provide, I think, starting fantasy value immediately as a rookie, serving as, maybe a weekly wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 at the very least. But yeah, his long-term value too, assuming Bryce Young continues to kind of develop positively like he did in the second half of last season, could be that of a future wide receiver 1 for fantasy as well. So I do like Tetairoa McMillan quite a bit. I know you do too. So yeah, how are you feeling? When it comes to drafting him as the 103, is there a teardrop for you at all, or is it pretty close with some of the other guys that we might talk about here a little bit later?
Yeah, I think like the top tier is Jeanty by himself or with Hunter if you're in an IDP league where you get that double scoring. And I think after that, McMillan's probably in a tier. I think the top 5 or so players are probably in the same tier. So outside of Hunter in that situation and Jeanty. So I think McMillan, someone who has the potential to be one of the elite wide receivers in the NFL. Certainly not there yet, but I think the combination of his height and weight and speed is a combination that you don't see very often. He is very fast for his size. So I think that has the potential to be a very great wide receiver. And the situation in Carolina, like you said with Bryce Young, even if he doesn't improve on where he was the second half of last year, if he can just maintain where he was the second half of last year, that's around a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, in which case that's great for McMillan. And then the big thing that I got excited about looking at this landing spot, not just the draft capital spent on him, but Dave Canales' offenses and his past with Mike Evans, his past with DK Metcalf, both wide receivers who had double-digit touchdowns in Dave Canales' offenses. So wide receivers who score a lot of touchdowns. McMillan, someone who was a huge end zone target throughout his career, had like a 50% end zone target share his last season at Arizona. So I think not just the potential for a lot of targets, the leader in targets in Carolina, I also think the opportunity is there for him to score a lot of touchdowns in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love this spot for him. I mean, Carolina has kind of this interesting mix of wide receivers right now between Xavier Legette is a first round pick from last year, but is probably still developmental as far as what he can do in the NFL, and Jalen Coker who emerged late last year, who we liked quite a bit. Then they got an older Adam Thielen as well. They brought in Hunter Renfrow, right? So there's all these options, but I think all of those guys have kind of question marks around them, where I don't think Tetairoa McMillan necessarily does have that question mark around what he could be right now in this offense. I think he kind of is the clear wide receiver one. Obviously, that could change and things can happen, but I do believe in him as that kind of top wide receiver in this offense. And yeah, hopefully Bryce Young does keep developing, because it was really promising to see him bounce back last year after kind of getting benched there for Andy Dalton and having a strong second half of the season. So some promising stuff coming out of Carolina. As we go to 105 and 106, we both have the basically the same two players here next to each other. Well, I know you have Travis Hunter as 105, but we kind of talked about him. But the next two players that we each have after the Hunter and McMillan and Hampton and Jeanty is Quinshon Judkins and Colston Loveland. So we're both basically, we have them right beside each other. It's just depending on who we like a little bit more. So you have Quinshon Judkins ahead of Loveland. I have Loveland ahead of Judkins. Honestly, I've been kind of flipping them as well, but yeah, I do tend to lean towards Colston Loveland at this point. But you have Quinshon Judkins. So tell us what you like about Judkins here in this spot. And yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it's just positional value as well. And at running back, I think Judkins has the potential to be an every down running back for Cleveland. Like, I know they drafted Sampson afterwards, but Sampson a smaller back. I think Sampson will be more of a change of pace back. And even had they not drafted Sampson, I would have expected Jerome Ford to take some snaps here and there in place of Judkins. So I ended up being not super concerned about Sampson landing there. Like, some other running back will get some playing time. That happens in every backfield. And that's fine that it's going to be Sampson instead of Ford. So I think Judkins, the quotes from the coaches and general manager afterwards have all been very positive of him being a potential every down back. The draft capital spent on him is that of an every down back. I think other years he would have been the top running back in the draft class. Like, had he been drafted last year, he would have been the number one running back in the draft class, I believe. So I think if you can get a feature running back in the NFL, then that's very valuable for fantasy purposes. So if you need a running back, perfectly happy to get Judkins around 104, even if like you have the third spot and it's Hampton and Jeanty that go 1-2, and you really need a running back over a wide receiver, I would probably even be fine getting Judkins over T-Mac there, or even trading down a little bit. The big concern for me with Judkins in general is just that Browns offensive line. They've had the same offensive line for a while now. They're basically all in their 30s at this point. All of them have had their grades start to decline. And so even though a couple years ago they were arguably the best offensive line, or at least among those top offensive lines, it's just slowly gotten worse and worse. And now they're near the bottom of the offensive lines. And yeah, they've added a couple of veteran players who could end up being starters over some of these what feel like all-time greats of Cleveland Browns players, like Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller have been guards for them for a while now and did very, very well in their prime. And it's possible one of them becomes a backup at some point this year, just depending on how the year's going. So the offensive line's a concern, but that might not always be a problem for him in Cleveland.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, like I do really like Judkins, and I know he doesn't have like this strong receiving profile coming out of college, but I'm with you. I think he can still get there. And even though they did draft Dylan Sampson in the fourth round, like Sampson does have a little bit more of a history as a receiving back, but I don't think Judkins, that he's going to give that up completely. And I don't know that it's enough for me to take him over Loveland right now in Dynasty. Probably redraft for sure, but not Dynasty. I'm not quite there yet. But I still, again, I do go back and forth on it. Like maybe, he can be kind of this, David Montgomery or Nick Chubb type option at the very worst, if he isn't getting those receiving options where, even though he didn't have this amazing profile coming out, like he can be really effective as an early down back. And you look at the types of offenses that those guys had top 12 success with, the 2020 Bears for David Montgomery with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback, and hell, even 2018 to 2022 Cleveland Browns for Nick Chubb. It doesn't have to be a perfect offense for these guys to go off. They just need the volume and the opportunity. And if Judkins is going to get 220 plus carries, then yeah, like he's absolutely capable of being a top 12 back even without the receiving upside, right? Like the most receptions I think Nick Chubb had in a season was 36 in 2019. That ranked 24th among running backs, and he finished that year as the PPR RB8. Now, I don't think Judkins will be as good as Chubb, but if the volume is within that range, then he should also be in that range of fantasy finish as well, for as long as he keeps getting those chances. So yeah, he's still top 6, potentially top 5 for me, mostly because of those opportunities. But at the same time, those opportunities might not last, I guess, as long for him as they do for maybe someone like Loveland. And I do keep coming back to the long-term thing. That's really been my tiebreaker here for a lot of these dynasty rookie rankings, where yeah, I have Colston Loveland as the higher pick here, just slightly, but it's a toss-up situation for me between the two. The tiebreaker being that the Bears and apparently a lot of teams viewed Loveland as this top 10 talent in the class. Apparently there were a number of teams looking to move up to get him, and when the Bears took him, that trade interest seemed to stop. So the NFL was clearly higher on Loveland than even Tyler Warren, which I thought was interesting, because I felt Warren could be tight end 1 in this class, and he still could be. But the love for Loveland tells a good story here. Now, he does end up on a more crowded depth chart for sure, like for targets than what even Tyler Warren is dealing with, and even what Judkins has his path to touches might be on paper in Cleveland out of that backfield. But again, kind of coming back to betting on the talent and the long-term talent, like I think Loveland has the potential to be an annual tight end 1 for fantasy for a long time. And even if he doesn't get there in year 1, I think the long-term potential at a still thinner position is kind of too good to pass up. Like I've seen Loveland go all over the places in drafts already. There have been super flex drafts where, he's gone early second round. Like I think, for year 1 situation, we might be overreacting a little bit for him, not unlike with Brock Bowers last year. And I believe he's fully capable of making kind of the most of his opportunities, being a consistent weapon for Caleb Williams, and kind of cementing himself as an elite tight end prospect for Dynasty coming out of this season. So don't get me wrong. Again, I still like Judkins a fair bit, but I'm always, I think, going to bet more on like the talent in dynasty rookie drafts than the year 1 situation. So that was really just my only tiebreaker here. But again, I can see myself drafting Judkins over Loveland at times for sure.
Yeah, I'll add, I have Loveland 6 overall, so our top 6 players are the same, just in different orders. And consensus has been lower on Loveland in dynasty drafts. Mm-hmm. For the most part, we are mostly in line with consensus in terms of where players are. But Loveland, looking at Fantasy Pros, for example, he's 10th in the consensus rankings. So you have him 5, I have 6. That's both a bit higher than what the consensus is. And I agree with you. Loveland has the potential to be the overall tight end 1, whether it's as a rookie or potentially future years. And I think that's well within the possibilities for him as a tight end. I'm a little less concerned about the general public, at least in terms of his potential for targets. I'm not concerned about Cole Kmet taking any of his playing time. He didn't even start week 1 last year. So even though 3 previous Bears coaching staffs really liked him and liked him enough to give him a large contract, the coaching staffs that have come in after the fact haven't prioritized him as much in the offense. So I think he'll be the clear tight end 2, playing in 2 tight end sets, maybe playing not in 21 personnel, because I don't think the Bears have a fullback on the roster, but potentially there'll be some 2 tight end sets that are more like a goal line package where it's Kmet, and then they did add Durham Smythe, who's also a blocking tight end, who maybe there'll be some of those clear run situations where Loveland's off the field. But my big concern with Loveland heading into this season was how much is he going to play those early downs, because a lot of receiving tight ends who aren't as good at blockers don't get to play in some of those situations. One of the clear exceptions is Sam Laporta, who Ben Johnson helped Laporta become the overall tight end 1-2 years ago. Now Ben Johnson is Loveland's coach. So I'm more confident now that Loveland will be on the field. And even though there's a lot of options in the passing game for Chicago, I think Loveland is probably the safest option to get a lot of targets, considering the draft capital that the current regime just put on Loveland, since they drafted Burden a round later. And the fact that they added 2 receiving options means they probably aren't entirely sold on DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. I'm at least more sold on DJ Moore because he has a longer history of success in the NFL, but there's a chance that they aren't as high on Moore and they're more okay with Odunze, or it could just be they aren't as happy with either. But we saw in Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit, it was the tight end and the slot receiver who got a lot of the production, and Loveland's a tight end. Burden's likely going to be the slot receiver. So even though there's competition for targets, I'm not even as concerned about it, because it's the current regime that prioritized getting Loveland first at a draft slot that you don't typically see tight ends get top 10 picked. So I think he has the potential to be a great tight end. And I think, like, we'll talk about Tyler Warren in a little bit. For me, a big tiebreaker between the two of them is I think Loveland can be that top overall tight end, where I don't think Warren's going to get there, because I don't think Warren has that same big play ability.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, look, the draft capital was obviously amazing. It was even better than what Brock Bowers got last year. So they loved him quite a bit. And yeah, I want to make, something clear. I said, like, we are, overreacting to like year one situation. I don't mean you and I mean, yeah, like fantasy drafters in general, right? And like you said, with fantasy pros, go, him dropping to like 110, and I've seen it a ton, right? That's been kind of the norm for where he's been drafted. And like, I get it. I get that there's, the concern, but I'm with you 100%. Everything that you just said, I believe in the talent, and I believe in still a year one opportunity for him to be a weekly starter for us. And I think for a long time. So still very high on Colston Loveland here coming out of the draft. 107. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'll just add, like, when I've been doing my draft so far, Loveland has probably been the first round guy that I've ended up with the most, like, nice, yeah. Because he's been falling in some of those drafts, and I'm willing to, like, usually I think trading back's a lot more beneficial than trading up in dynasty drafts, because people overvalue the guys they like. But Loveland's been the one player that, like, if he falls to that 8th or 9th pick, I've been more willing to trade up a little bit in order to secure Loveland.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, he's been end of the first round is where I've been drafting quite a bit, and that seems to be the spot where I just keep getting a chance at him, and in Superflex especially, like 112 I think was one spot. So very happy with that kind of return, and especially in tight end premium league too. It was a tight end premium, yeah. So yeah, it's just there's a lot of value here to soak up with Colston Loveland. Okay, 107 for us. We both have TreVeyon Henderson in this spot here, going to the New England Patriots, drafted in the second round. Obviously, going to New England with Ramondre Stevenson there, it isn't ideal. It probably caps his ceiling a little bit in year one, arguably more than like Quinshon Judkins or RJ Harvey. But considering the investment in him as the 4th running back off the board in the NFL draft very early in round 2, he's going to get a lot of opportunities, right? And also, has a strong enough receiving profile that will help kind of boost his PPR value a little bit, and that potential there. But I like TreVeyon Henderson. Maybe he doesn't get the bulk of like goal line touches, which is definitely going to hurt him. But if this offense, takes a step forward year 2 with Drake May, like adding Stephon Diggs as well as Henderson and a healthy Ramondre Stevenson, like maybe, their opportunities around the goal line increase as well, where, he's still getting some touches there and converting. Like, again, I like Henderson. I don't love the landing spot, so I'm fine with anyone that wants to, maybe pivot to like an RJ Harvey here for more immediate returns. But again, has kind of been the trend with my rankings. I'm giving the edge to more kind of long-term potential here in Dynasty. And I think that edge goes to Henderson for me, considering his age and the team's draft capital investment in him as well. There's still a lot to like here long-term for Henderson for the running back position. So how did you feel about him with the Patriots?
Oh, yeah. Like when I was doing my winners and losers, we talked about it earlier in the week where Henderson was probably the biggest loser for me in terms of where he landed, with Josh McDaniels' offense having a heavy role to do with that. McDaniels, a long-time offensive coordinator or head coach in the NFL, and almost every single year, except for one, the player who led the team in in carries at running back was not the same player who led the team in third down snaps. And I view Henderson as more likely to be the third down running back for New England than the player to lead their team in carries. I think people have discounted at least a little bit McDaniels being on the team just a couple years ago, so he already has experience with Ramondre Stevenson. One of Stevenson's most effective seasons came with Josh McDaniels on offense. I've seen that, just a side note, a little bit at wide receiver too, where like Matt Collins has had his best season with Josh McDaniels as his head coach. Kendrick Bourne has had his best season as a wide receiver with Josh McDaniels as his head coach. And it's not even close. Like both of them, it's a good 200, 300-yard gap between their best seasons and their second best season. And now both wide receivers are in the mix as well as Stephon Diggs and Mario Douglas. So it's going to be a very crowded wide receiver room as well for New England. So I think Henderson, at least initially, will probably play on third downs. He'll play a little bit on early downs, but I don't see that immediate return for him. I think Ramondre Stevenson will still be heavily involved in this offense. I still even think Antonio Gibson will find a way to get a little bit involved in the offense, but these are dynasty rankings and not redraft rankings. So even though if I were to rank all of the rookies in terms of where I'm drafting them in redraft, Henderson would be lower than this, but it's because the draft capital spent on him. He's not always going to have Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator. Ramondre Stevenson probably not always going to be part of the Patriots backfield either. So things can change. Things could change in the middle of the season. Things could change after the season. And at any point, things could be different. So because of the draft capital spent on him and the talent that we both know he has, we had him, I think, both as the third running back in this class heading into the draft. Yeah. So, Henderson has the talent. So even though it might not be the immediate return on the investment, I think long term, Henderson will find a situation at some point where he is more involved in the offense.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. Like, I mean, look, like you said, situations change so quickly in the NFL, like whether it's week to week or year to year, right? So, try not to get too bogged down in what the situation looks like for him as a rookie. Like, he's going to get a decent amount of runway here as an early second round pick to kind of prove that he's worth that draft capital. And I think he is. The talent is definitely there. We talked a lot about him, pre-draft too. Like you said, he was kind of our consensus RB3 for this class. And, just again, I think the draft capital right now at like around the middle of the first round is right for him. And, if you want to swap him for, RJ Harvey at the same time, like I get it. I don't necessarily know that I'm there just yet, but depends what you're looking for, right? If you're, an immediate contender, you're running for a championship this year and you have that spot and you have the choice there, RJ Harvey is a little bit more, I guess interesting for redraft, right? So, or for year one, which might give him the edge in your rankings. But for us, I think we like Henderson here for general dynasty purposes. And speaking of RJ Harvey, he is our next running back here on the list. And like I said, the running backs in this range, I think they can be arranged however we see fit. I'm personally moving them around quite a bit on a daily basis, basically since the NFL draft concluded. So, shouldn't be an expected consensus around these picks at this point. But I think, between the Ohio State running backs and RJ Harvey, I think there's a lot of reason to like all of these guys. Harvey might have the best opportunity for touches in year one for those options. So, even if his long-term value isn't likely to be overly high, like he's already 24 years old and, not necessarily like the highly touted prospect that Quinshon Judkins or TreVeyon Henderson were heading into this draft. And then, the draft capital will tell that story as well, which gives him, gives them, I think, the slightest edge in dynasty rookie drafts. But for 2025, Harvey is probably the one who leads the way for me, just without doing the full rankings yet. But how are you feeling about, if you were to look at these three running backs for 2025, how close is it? I know Henderson probably third, but how close is it between Harvey and Quinshon Judkins for you at this point?
I still have Judkins just a little bit ahead, but it's not by much with Harvey. We have so many things that we like about Harvey with Denver, looking at Sean Payton's past, looking at their need at running back, looking at how Harvey succeeds. Like the Broncos with Sean Payton were the top team at throwing passes to running backs, even though they had Javonte Williams and other running backs, and they weren't the best receiving running backs in the world. They still caught a ton of passes. So Harvey, who is a good receiving back, should continue to catch a lot of passes. There's a chance he'll lead the league among running backs in terms of receptions this year. And I think he'll get involved in the run game a decent amount as well. The only thing that's probably holding me back a little bit compared to Judkins, at least in redraft, is I'm decently confident Judkins will lead the team in carries, will be a feature back there, probably lead the team or running back backfield in targets as well, potentially. The Broncos were so confusing at running back last year. Like someone would do well one week and then not get the same opportunities the next week. There would be week after week where they're like, Estime is going to get more playing time, and then he didn't over and over. Even in the preseason, like almost every other team, it was pretty predictive. What they were doing in the preseason would lead to something in the regular season, or at least like a team would play their starters and then their backups, or they would sit their starters, play their backups, and then their third string. With the Broncos, they would play their veterans who they ended up cutting, and then played the players that were eventually going to start with them. So the Broncos were very confusing last year, and there's a chance that could be the case this year. Like we think Harvey's going to be this clear guy who can get a ton of touches, but they could also be a 3-man rotation. Maybe they finally trust Audric Estime after the offseason, and Estime ends up leading the team in carries, and McLaughlin still gets involved in the passing game some. So that's the only thing probably holding me back from having Harvey ahead of Judkins at this moment, is just the Broncos being willing to completely go against what we think is logical and do something weird. And it worked for them. They made the playoffs, but it didn't work for our fantasy leagues.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, it's easy to forget how frustrating that backfield was last year. But yeah, I'm with you. I tend to lean towards them giving Harvey a more consistent and better workload, just considering that they went out and spent the second round pick on him. But yeah, I agree. Like there's definitely potential there for them to play some shenanigans. Like that is kind of the way in the NFL with most backfields, right? Like they have guys that they prefer in certain situations. They're going to mix it up. There's not necessarily going to be a clear workhorse running back on every team, and most teams don't have that. So they're going to, rotate these guys a fair bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see it. Just hoping, obviously, for that not to be the case here after, spending a second round pick on Harvey, but definitely possible. Who else do we got here? We got Tyler Warren up next, Nate, at 109. So we talked about Loveland. We talked about, both of these guys pre-draft. And I think pre-draft, we were, both at Tyler Warren as tight end 1. I know I had him there. And it seemed like that was the way that the NFL was going to draft him as well. A lot of consensus mock drafts had Colston Loveland going just outside the top 20, where Tyler Warren was pushing for that top 10 potential. But a lot of the mock drafts had Tyler Warren going to the Indianapolis Colts, which is where he lands up. How do we feel about this landing spot? And, as a getting later here in the first round, I typically tend to like this spot for Tyler Warren, but where are you at with it?
I am generally fine with the landing spot with Indianapolis. There is a little bit of concern in there. First off, the thing I'm not concerned about is his playing time. I know the Colts had a rotation of tight ends recently. I think Warren's going to play a very high percentage of snaps at tight end. Just looking at the coaching staff and their history with tight ends, like Shane Steichen, these past 2 years with the Colts have been this huge rotation. And even before that with the Colts, it was a huge rotation. But before that, he was with Philadelphia, where Dallas Goedert at times was playing 90% of the offensive snaps. And even before that, 2020 with Hunter Henry played 87.3% of snaps with the Los Angeles Chargers with Steichen as the lead offensive guy there. So he has a clear history of having tight ends not just being in a feature role, but being in a role bigger than almost any other tight end in the league. So I think Warren, his playing time is perfectly safe in this offense. I think in terms of quarterback, we saw last year with Brock Bowers. Bowers was able to be the clear tight end 1 with subpar quarterback play. The one thing that I am concerned about with Anthony Richardson, though, is his he throws deep more than basically any other quarterback in the league, and that style of play doesn't go all that well with Warren. Warren, I think, will be this low average depth of target player, not be thrown at deep very often, but catch a lot of short passes, which leads to a lot of volume, which is good for fantasy. Trey McBride is another tight end who wins that way. He has low average depth of target, not thrown at deep very much. So I view Warren very similarly. And if Richardson ideally will take advantage of that and take those easy passes. He has been the least accurate quarterback, not just in terms of accuracy total, but also accuracy on those shorter passes. So the accuracy concern is a little bit there, but I think Warren is just too good of a talent that he should still see a number of targets. I think if Daniel Jones were to win this quarterback job, I'd probably be even more confident, because even though Jones isn't the best quarterback in the world, he does not throw deep very often, and he is relatively accurate depending on how deep he's throwing. He's not a good deep accurate thrower, but his accuracy on shorter passes is just fine. So I think if Jones were to be the quarterback, I'd be maybe even a little higher on Warren this year. But I think Warren, a fairly safe player. I think he can very well be a fantasy starter immediately in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is kind of how I was looking at him as well, right? He is this kind of low ADOT receiving option, which, should make him more quarterback friendly. But, for that to happen with Anthony Richardson, like, look, if they want Anthony Richardson to succeed, like, they have to change things up for him. They cannot just let him chuck it deep all the time. They have to get him to work on the short game and those intermediate passes, because they've now brought in help to do that, where Tyler Warren can be that option for him to help him a little bit, provide something after the catch as well, which he did really well in college, and he was really productive in that kind of role. So if they're committed to making Anthony Richardson better, they also have to commit to change with Anthony Richardson and kind of get him working on those shorter passes, not dial up so much deep for him, which, who knows, that could also been him trying to, chuck it deep as well. And just because that's something that he has the ability to do with as far as his arm, but the accuracy has to improve. And I think that starts with the shorter areas of the field, and Tyler Warren, I think, can be the top target in helping him do that. So I do believe in Warren. I think you're right. The leash will be short with Anthony Richardson, where Daniel Jones has the potential to get out on the field and be an option at quarterback for him, which is definitely going to help as well. But yeah, I still, Warren, tight end 2 for me. I get that if people don't love the Loveland opportunity and they like Warren's opportunity a little bit better, I can see people flipping these two in rankings and drafts, which I have seen at least once already. But I tend to agree that, yeah, Warren at 109 late first round, that tends to be about the area for him for me. Okay, at 110, we have Emeka Egbuka, top 20 pick in this year's draft, going to the Tampa Bay Lightning, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm sorry, I was watching hockey last night. This is what happens. So Egbuka, another guy that, another situation that we don't necessarily love in year one, but one that I think, still can be better long-term. But where are you at with Egbuka? Because I know, redrafters aren't going to love this one, but for dynasty purposes, like top 20 pick, and I'm still feeling kind of confident in his long-term ability here in Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah. I think we both have him a little lower than consensus in terms of dynasty. For me, it feels like Tampa Bay just got to their draft pick and decided to pick the best available player regardless of what their team needed. I don't think they drafted this necessarily with a plan in mind for Egbuka to get heavily involved in the offense immediately. I think the competition for playing time, the competition for touches is going to be huge in Tampa Bay, not just immediately, but at least for these next couple seasons, since they just re-signed Chris Godwin. Godwin's not going to go away in the near future, and Godwin is very well liked among the team in general, so he might stay even. He doesn't feel like someone that they're going to cut the soonest they possibly can because of the respect they have for him and the quality of player that Godwin's been. And then Jayden McMillan, another player who played fairly well compared to where he was drafted last year. He's on his rookie contract. They're not going to be getting rid of him anytime soon. And all three of them can play in the slot, can play the Z receiver spot. So there's a bit of overlap between those three players. A chance Egbuka becomes the top player among those three and therefore becomes the top target. But even then, we saw Baker Mayfield play really well this past year. but they no longer have Liam Cohen at offensive coordinator. So will they be able to still have the magic, even ignoring Egbuka being there? Is Tampa Bay's offense going to do as good this upcoming year as they did last year? I don't know if that'll be the case. So there's a lot of ifs of things that need to go right in order for Egbuka to be fantasy relevant in the near future. Like, it feels like it needs a Chris Godwin injury and Tampa Bay's offense to still be playing very well in order for Egbuka to be someone you could consider starting in year one or potentially year two, where you can see a lot better scenarios for people having immediate value this year or even in 2026. But Egbuka, the talent is there. We know the talent's there. We liked him heading into the draft. And it's because we know the talent's there that Egbuka is here for us and not even lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I could definitely see this still being like a crowded situation, even in year two for him. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't be surprised. We look at, by the end of the year, if he is the most productive of the bunch, like Mike Evans is 32 years old. Chris Godwin, coming off a season ending injury, nearing 30 himself. Jayden McMillan is good, but there's absolutely a world where, like, this ultra effective slot receiver becomes the top target in the offense on a weekly basis. I know he wasn't even the top option at Ohio State, but it's not like, he wasn't productive there either. And as much as, we think highly of Evans and Godwin as NFL wide receivers, they could be past their primes as well, which, the guys that Egbuka was competing with at Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith, even Jackson Smith and Jigba early in his college career, those guys were definitely not past their prime. So yeah, we might be lower on him than consensus here at 110, but I could definitely see this, being a good spot for him as at least for long-term value. So yeah, I'm okay with Egbuka for sure.
I'll add, I definitely see a world where, like, Mike Evans doesn't reach 1,000 yards, Chris Godwin isn't quite as effective, in which case we could have 3 or 4 wide receivers all getting around 700 to 800 yards, and you don't know who among any of them you can be starting each week this year. So even though I definitely agree Mike Evans probably isn't going to be as productive, Chris Godwin, hard to tell with the injury. Even in that scenario, I'm like, can I trust Egbuka starting if everyone's eating in the offense?
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, next up here at 111 for you, Nate, you have Matthew Golden of the Green Bay Packers, goes first round. I know, I don't have Matthew Golden in the first round here. I'm not as big of a fan. I put Jayden Higgins in this range for me for the Houston Texans. But what do you like about Golden, I guess, as a late first round pick here in rookie drafts?
So Golden, for me, I actually also have him above Egbuka, so I have him at 110. Okay. A lot of it's the draft capital in that he was one of the top wide receivers off the board, a late first-round pick for him, but also landing with Green Bay, where I think there is the opportunity for targets. I think he could be the top receiver in this offense, potentially. The Packers have found success drafting wide receivers, so even though we weren't the most excited about him, there's some things that remind me of Brian Thomas Jr. That's around the same time that he was drafted on a team that needs a top wide receiver. The grades in college weren't always great, but there were some of those sparks of being able to do some fairly impressive things. So if he's able to put it all together, he can be the clear target earner in the Packers offense. So for me, it's the upside for him and potential upside immediately for him that he can be the top target earner in a good offense with a good quarterback, even though there's also certainly a world where the Packers just have a 4-man rotation on the outside like they've had recently, where it was more of a 3-man, but potentially even more players, and he's not getting as much playing time as we like, and he's only playing a specific role in the offense. I think the Packers are just so much in need of a clear wide receiver one in the offense, and Golden is the one player most likely to take that role in the offense that if it works out, then we have a situation where top 10, top 15 is within the realm of possibility. There's just a lot of bad scenarios in there too, where he's just never fantasy relevant and just makes a couple of big plays throughout the season.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with him, right? Like, I just think the risk is so much higher with Golden. As much as I agree, like, I definitely agree that there is that potential there. I just, the amount of times that I could see this not working out, I think it was a little bit higher. Like, the low end efficiency coming out of college, obviously a concern. We talked about that, before, about receivers not cracking at least 2 yards per route run for a college career, it's more often than not going to translate to them, being ineffective for fantasy. Like basically the other day 1 to 2 guys to break that trend are Brian Thomas Jr., DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin. Chase Claypool had one good season if you want to include him, but otherwise, like the misses are much more, right? Like the Terrence Marshall, Tyquan Thornton, maybe Xavier Legette, A.D. Mitchell, Van Jefferson, Jonathan Mingo, Miles Boykin, Devin Duvernay, Michael Wilson, Josh Palmer. We'll see on guys like Keon Coleman, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Polk. But I think, if we were redrafting, the 2024 class, we wouldn't consider any of them to be first round rookie picks based on what we saw last year. And those are just the guys with high draft capital too, right? Like if you go beyond day 2, sub 2.0 yards per route run runners, there's a ton more with where none of them achieve fantasy success, basically except for like Hunter Renfrow in recent years. But also, he's got 4.2 speed, which we know the NFL loves those guys, but they also seem to, overvalue them all the time as well, right? Like the Rondell Moores and Tyquan Thorntons and KJ Hamlers and Henry Ruggs and Anthony Schwartz and, maybe even Jameson Williams, Xavier Worthy, even Hollywood Brown. Like all of them went no later than day 2. Arguably, only Hollywood Brown was worth the first at the time, maybe JMO, but even him, like the Lions picked, they did pick up the 5th-year option, so there's still a chance that he can be great. But the NFL is wrong about overvaluing that straight line speed more often than not, either way. So, I just like. I worry about Golden, like even out of Texas, like they ran a ton of 2 wide receiver sets and he should have had no problem producing with mostly just Isaiah Bond, who didn't even get drafted, didn't have an encouraging production profile himself. Like that was the other primary target competition. So I'm not going to say that Golden won't work out, but the chances of him doing so were just unlikely enough for me that I'm not willing to bet on him in the first round of rookie drafts. And if that means I end up with no shares, I can definitely live with that. The NFL is wrong all the time. We as fantasy players are wrong all the time. So I don't want to be overconfident in my evaluations either. I'm just kind of playing the odds here. And for me, he was more of a second rounder in rookie drafts. I just didn't like the risk of what he could be. More so than the upside.
And I'd add, like, he is a hard person to project because you mentioned a lot of wide receivers there, and a lot of them were first-round fantasy picks when they were rookies, but the draft capital spent on them, a lot of them were more second-round guys in the NFL draft or very late first-round guys. Golden might have been the highest drafted out of a lot of the guys you mentioned, outside of, like, Jameson Williams, who is a different case in that kind of stuff. So part of it for me is just trusting the draft capital spent on someone mixed with the situation, even if I didn't like the college player as much, even though there were like small sample size things to like his play in the college football playoffs or his +1+ or higher graded catches. There were some good things there, but they aren't the consistent things that, looking historically over time, like you've been doing, lead to success. So I agree, he's definitely risky, but for me, it's the draft capital mixed with the situation and less the player himself. And trusting the NFL's evaluation more than my own evaluation of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fair. I absolutely understand that for sure. I just couldn't do it. Like I like Jayden Higgins a lot more. I know, we kind of talked about this last week, but firstly, the production profile, like I like that a lot more than Golden's. He had 2 really productive years at Iowa State this past season. Was even his more productive year. He posted over 1,100 yards. He led the team in yards per out run, despite kind of average-ish quarterback play and better target competition with Jalen Knoll than what Golden had at Texas. But I do think there's room for another outside wide receiver like Higgins to work alongside Nico Collins and be more productive than Golden, like not just in year 1, but long-term as well. Like the draft capital, it is there, early second-round pick. The production is there. I think the offense of the Texans is a good one with CJ Stroud at quarterback. I just tend to think that, as far as like overall wide receiver prospects, there's a lot more to like about Jayden Higgins and for Dynasty. So I want to bet on the talent a little bit more versus, kind of the situation. Because again, situations change all the time in the NFL, but the talent tends to last much longer. So I would rather bet on Higgins, which I know it's not maybe going to be popular, but I just think he's less of an NFL projection right now than what Golden is. And I still like his chances here for Dynasty to kind of be the better wide receiver.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week as well with winners and losers. For me with Higgins, I just have a hard time seeing how he's going to fit exactly in the Texans offense, coexisting with Nico Collins, since I think there's such an overlap in terms of their skill set. The one thing, I was writing his player profile recently, and like Nico Collins has missed time every year in the NFL, at least 2 games every season. So in those games, like Higgins, I think, will be the clear top wide receiver in the offense, taking Nico Collins' role in those games, in which case he's a clear fantasy starter those weeks. But the weeks where Nico Collins is there, I think Collins is going to be the top target earner in the offense. And I could see a rotation of wide receivers in the other spots, since they have Christian Kirk. They added Noel in the 4th round, was it? Mm-hmm. So they have multiple other wide receivers. Plus they added like 2 other guys in free agency, have the guys that they did have on the roster. So they are going to be releasing players who have a decent amount of NFL experience once we get to cutdown day. So they have a number of wide receivers in the offense. They don't have to have the same 3 wide receivers on the field every play. So I think, at least short term, I see this as somewhat of a rotation. I didn't view him quite as highly as some of the other wide receivers either we've talked about so far or will talk about. So part of it for me, as well as the pre-draft evaluation, where I think he's just a tad behind some of the other wide receivers. But I think the possibility is certainly there. I just don't know exactly how he will coexist with Nico Collins. And like you said, situations do change. But I don't see Nico Collins leaving the Texans anytime soon, because he is a young wide receiver who is one of the highest graded wide receivers in the NFL. So I don't think that will be changing for him basically anytime during his rookie contract, unless injuries become more of a concern.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm definitely probably higher on him than consensus. I don't have the exact draft cap or ADP in front of me here or anything like that. But again, maybe letting a little bit of the pre-draft bias sink in here and affect my rankings. But I tend to like Jayden Higgins quite a bit.
I do have it open now. He's
yeah.
typically like the 16th player picked, which I have him higher than 16th. Like Trey Harris by consensus is a little above him, and I definitely have Higgins ahead of Harris at this point. So I do have Higgins at least a little higher than consensus.
Okay. Yeah. And we liked, talking about Trey Harris last episode as well. And that is surprising to kind of see him still above Jayden Higgins. But again, a lot of the concerns that you talked about are definitely baked into that as well. So our last name here, at least for 112, we both got different names. And honestly, I'm actually fine with either here. I've tinkered with both as round 1 picks here at the end. It's Kaleb Johnson, running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers for you. And then for me, I had wide receiver Luther Burden of the Chicago Bears. So I really like the opportunity for Johnson in Pittsburgh. I'm sure you do as well, Nate. So what's got Johnson coming into the first round for you?
Oh, yeah. First off, perfectly happy basing this off of your team need. If you have the 12th pick and are deciding between the 2, if you need a running back, go Johnson. If you need a wide receiver, go Burden. Perfectly fine with that. For me, a little bit of it is just looking at historic numbers in terms of where players are drafted and how much success they have in fantasy, and generally fine with 3rd round running backs, even over 2nd round wide receivers at times. So that plays a little bit of it for me in terms of having Johnson here. Also just the offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh and how much they're going to run the ball, even if it's Warren being the running back who gets the most fantasy points in this offense. I still expect Johnson to see a decent number of carries. I could see him still getting 10 carries a game, and Warren also being a fantasy starter. I think that's within the realm of possibility, unless Aaron Rodgers signs with the team and Aaron Rodgers takes over the offense, and it doesn't resemble anything of the offense we saw last year, which is also entirely possible, in which case this is messy, but I don't expect Rodgers to be the quarterback there for all that long if that ends up being the case. So I think Johnson, he's just a quality running back. I think he's probably only a 2-down back, which probably puts a little bit of a ceiling on his potential. But for me, the landing spot was more of a positive than a negative, because there was a chance where he would have been a more clear backup somewhere else. So I still trust Warren to probably get even more playing time than he's seen in the past, and maybe Johnson doesn't see quite as much playing time as Najee Harris was getting. But if Johnson can be more effective than Najee Harris was, think it was just 2 years ago where both Harris and Warren finished among the top 24 running backs in fantasy points. I think that's within the realm of possibility with these two running backs in Pittsburgh, as long as Aaron Rodgers is not the quarterback. Hopefully it's a trade for Kirk Cousins if Rodgers doesn't end up there.
Yeah, it definitely, I'm with you. Like, I like the opportunity for Johnson in Pittsburgh compared to, like you said, some of the other potential landing spots. And I know Mike Tomlin came out talking about viewing him as a volume back and encouraging words like that the fantasy community is going to love, right? But like you mentioned, there's this one thing that like constantly nags at me that makes me think Tomlin's words might be a little like hyperbolic, and that the presence of Arthur Smith, who, as much as he likes to run the ball, he likes to throw a wrench into the plans of fantasy managers, even more so, it seems. And the way that, he could potentially be doing that here is sharing the workload a little bit with Jaylen Warren. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell gets work as well. Hell, even his guy, Cordell Patterson, is still there. So there's like a chance that, Johnson's touches aren't nearly as ideal as Tomlin might have us believe, thanks to Arthur Smith. But that being said, I think Warren is really the only one that is capable of eating into Johnson's workload right now. And he's not scary enough to keep me from taking him, in the first round on occasion, but is at least a reason for me to like maybe take shots on guys like a Luther Burden or a Cam Skedabo in this range as well, depending on how I'm feeling. It's more of a fluid range for me at the draft, to be honest.
That's fair.
Yeah, and right now, like, I do have Luther Burden in that 112 spot, but again, that does change. I've had Scatabo there, I've had Kaleb Johnson there, but I'm leaving it as a Burden for now, and I'll make the case for him. But I do believe that this new Ben Johnson regime, as we kind of talked about with Loveland, like, they invested in Colston Loveland and Luther Burden very early in this year's draft because they have plans to lean on them in the offense and maybe even like them more than the options who are already in place, DJ Moore, Romo Dunze, like you mentioned, because they didn't draft those guys. They inherited them, right? And I think that does mean something, at least to an extent, because it's like when you take over like an orphaned dynasty roster, right? There could be players on that roster that you like, but at the same time might view them as more expendable and want to put your own stamp on the team so that you can feel, more ownership over the players that you're managing. And I think, given their first two picks in this draft, like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the feeling here from Ben Johnson and this kind of new look Bears coaching staff as well. Like, it doesn't change the fact that necessarily, the path to targets for Burden right now is arguably the worst of any player that we've talked about, and even some of the players who will be drafted afterwards. But again, when it comes to dynasty, I want the talent. Situations can and will quickly change, and Burden is the type of player that I can see earning a larger role in this offense, especially if he's viewed as kind of the Amon-Ra St. Brown type option in this passing game. Like, 112 could end up being a steal for Burden if we look back on this in a year or two from now. So still believe in Luther Burden quite a bit, even though it isn't the most ideal landing spot for year one.
Yeah, I've got Burden 14. I do have him one spot ahead of Higgins. It's Cam Skadaboo that I have at 13, so I think it's worth mentioning. I think our top 15 guys are both the same, and at least for me, there's a pretty decent gap after Higgins towards everyone else. Like, yeah, there's wide receivers we like in that range and whatnot, but if you have a draft coming up, if you can, like, if you're picking 205, for example, it might be worth trying to trade up to 203, even if you don't know who you're getting between Burden and Higgins and Skadaboo and Johnson and so on. Like, I think that's fine, not knowing and being able to get one of those good players. So I think that's, for me, a pretty clear drop off in the draft. But Burden, I think it's an interesting player in that, like, we viewed him highly heading into this. We thought he could have been a first round pick. So the fact that he fell in the draft hurts him at least a little bit for me. And then Chicago's just the interesting landing spot. You talked about it. We talked about it earlier with Loveland. There's a chance Burden is a slot-only guy in this offense, in which case that's really hard to have fantasy value, and the slot is at least where I view him playing most of the time with the other wide receivers they have in the offense and where Burden played in college. But there is a chance that Burden can overtake Rome Odunze, play in 2 wide receiver sets as well as 3 wide receiver sets, play that Amon-Ra St. Brown role, be the top wide receiver in this offense. I think there's a chance that happens this year. So I think that high upside chance is there. There's also just the chance that they spread the ball around and you can't start Burden. You probably can't start Odunze. You maybe can't even start DJ Moore. That's entirely possible as well. So, and those wide receivers are also going to be there at least a little bit. Loveland's going to be there throughout Burden's rookie's contract. Rome Odunze is going to be there at least for another couple of seasons. DJ Moore signed a big contract, so I think at least another season or two with DJ Moore. So even though situations change, he's still going to face significant competition for targets at least these next few seasons.
Yeah, no, I agree. And people are definitely concerned about that, right? Like I had a pick this morning. I was picking at, I think it was like 209 or something like that. It was super flex. Luther Burden was still on the board. So that was like the easy pick for me. It was tight end premium and stuff as well. But I still think, he's somebody that people are concerned about. They don't love the year one potential. And, there's definitely reason to be concerned about it. But I do think, for dynasty purposes, we can bet on Burden here for a little bit longer term. And I think there's potential here with Ben Johnson's offense. So that is going to do it for us, Nate. That's kind of our top 12-ish to 14 to 15, however many players we talked about here. But that'll do it for us this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We definitely appreciate that. Nate, thank you to you as well. And please let everybody know everything that you have going on at pff.com this week as well.
So I've been updating my rankings, did some slight tweaks to my dynasty rankings compared to earlier in the week, which did include moving RJ Harvey up a little bit. There's too many names to remember from this draft class, and we're trying to memorize all of them, even the later ones. But RJ Harvey, so I moved him up a couple of spots, moved Matthew Golden down a couple of spots, and then players beyond that as well. So updated those rankings. Have also been going through player profiles, have been posting 5 of them a day, at least to start with. So have the 20 rookies already up. We'll have another 5 tomorrow and a couple more to come in after that. So if you do have a draft and you want more of a deep dive in any player in particular, even a deeper dive than what we've been talking about, going through everything in terms of their college production, their competition for touches, the coaching staff, how other teammates on the offense will affect them, have deep dives on all of those players. So definitely feel free to check those out.
Nice, love it. Yeah, and you could also access a lot of the lock content as well. Remember to use the code DRAFT25 to get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. And then as for me, rookie IDP rankings are up on the site right now. I did an offense plus IDP rankings and walkthrough article and video for the YouTube. I got one QB in my Superflex rankings and tiers that are up there for the rookies as well. I'll have an IDP winners and losers coming out of the NFL draft, and we also recorded a winners and losers on offense for the podcast and for the YouTube crowd that came out earlier this week. And then next week, we'll have a rookie Superflex mock draft that we'll do. We'll talk some rookie sleepers as well. So still lots of rookie content to come. So hopefully you'll join us for that. But until next time, peace out.